The story of Udāyin and the secret of the house full of flowers. Hello everyone. Today we will explore a mysterious and captivating story. In this story we meet Udāyin, a beautiful and talented young woman who captured the attention of Prince Siddhartha with her beautiful voice and lute playing. But that was just the beginning of a mysterious journey. The story takes us to a special house where secrets are hidden behind the brilliant flowers. What does Udāyin have to do with this house, and what secrets are waiting to be discovered? Let's listen to this story with our Buddhist storytelling channel and discover the mysteries behind the house full of flowers. Hope you have fun. The story of Udāyin and the secret of the house full of flowers. Hearing that the prince and his wife were going hunting, the people of Kapilavastu were busy preparing ornamental plants in front of their houses. They turned the most beautiful flower pots out to the street to welcome the prince. People waited to see the gentle face with long, soft eyebrows snaking over the blue eyes like the clear waters of the Ganges, the bold posture and the plump body of the young man. The prince always led the cavalry with bright weapons on their shoulders, majestically riding on strong horses. Every time the prince went for a walk that night, the music of the young girls in the city would resound, both seductive and sorrowful, causing the flowers around the garden to be drunk on music and forget their fragrance. And the neighbors would also be absent-mindedly abandon their work, sitting like statues. That afternoon, people waited in vain. The beautiful flowers only showed their colors to passers-by. At the city gate, the prince had abandoned his hunt. Prince Sakyamuni witnessed the contrast between his strong body like a growing tree and the ugly figure of an old man like a dry stick. His white beard and hair were rough like the fur of an animal. His body was bent, his hands touched the ground as if he were about to crawl. Could it be so? A strong man like me now will one day be like that? The prince wondered and turned his horse back. That night, the full moon shone brightly on the king's palace. The strange flowers and grasses in the garden sparkled like jade. King Tintfant was informed by his guards that the prince had interrupted his walk because he had met an old man. The king immediately organized a dance under thousands of flower lamps to distract the prince. But Prince Tichka still could not forget the old man, and his white beard and hair seemed to appear on the treetops in the garden under the silvery moonlight. The king worried about taking care of the crown prince because the crown prince was the only one who could succeed him. The crown prince was a handsome young man of 19 years old who was proficient in all professions, from astronomy, geography, argumentation, poetry, literature, music, painting to fortune-telling, magic, martial arts. The crown prince was an outstanding person. Not only did the king love him because of that, but he also loved the crown prince because he was the result of a loving relationship between the king and Queen Mahamada. The crown prince was the sacred love that the queen left for the king in this world. 19 years ago, one night, the queen had a dream that she was lost in a wild forest. A white elephant with 6 tusks came and caressed her forever. When she found out she was pregnant, the queen told the story to the king. The king thought it was a good dream and was very happy because he was 50 years old and the queen was about the same age as him. If the queen was lucky enough to give birth to a son, the king would have a successor. According to Indian custom, one must return to one's parents' home to give birth. One day in Lumbini Garden in the country of Kuli, the homeland of Queen Mahamada, the birds sang incessantly. The sun rose higher and brighter than usual. That night, the flower bushes all gave off a sweet fragrance. Queen Mahamada strolled in the flower garden of King Tianjek, her brother, absent-mindedly looking at the moon and praying, "Oh, divine beings, please bless my child to be as bright as the moon. His wisdom will cover the whole world like the moonlight." The stars gradually thinned out in the dark sky. Dawn lit up one side of the garden. The queen suddenly felt a stomachache, and she leaned against a Bodhi tree. The sun had just risen and spread its golden light throughout Lumbini Garden. A child was born, more beautiful and perfect than all the jewels in the world. That child was Prince Shakyamuni. From the day the crown prince returned from his outing, a pensive look still lingered on his bright and intelligent face. To ease the prince's sadness, the king arranged entertainments in the palace every day. The singers and dancers, along with the musicians and singers, had the opportunity to show off their talents. The king also issued an edict that anyone who brought a strange object or a good profession to the palace to entertain the prince would be richly rewarded. People brought strange things: night-blooming cereus flowers as big as large plates, jasmine flowers with petals as big as roses, golden lotus flowers that bloomed all year round, banana trees with hundreds of bunches, strange creatures from the mountains and the sea, corals, precious gems, and exquisite carvings. Among them there was a horse that especially attracted the prince's attention. It was both beautiful and intelligent, with a well-proportioned body and 4 long legs. Standing next to the largest horses in the palace, it still stood out. Its color was unique: black eyes that sparkled like black beads, hooves that sparkled in the dark like rhinoceros horns, silky white fur like snow on the Himalayas, a mane that was as shiny as golden silk, and around its neck were 5 colored patterns that curved like a rainbow. In addition, people skillfully attached 2 yin-yang bells to its 2 front legs. When the horse ran, the music blended into a stirring, mysterious melody like the sound of a stream flowing late at night or the sound of birds singing in the distant forest. Perhaps, since he had that horse, the prince had been able to relieve some of his sadness. However, at night, the king was still worried that the prince would have nothing to entertain himself with, so he continuously organized parties. Every night, there were dances and banquets in the palace. Under the bright candlelight like torches, the gold, silver, and jade inlaid on the pillars, ceilings, and the crowns of the guests reflected a myriad of magical colors. Incense scents wafted in all directions, and wine in crystal cups of various colors was like a spring flower garden. The dancers competed in dancing and singing, their bodies swaying to the music like ripples, their faces as fresh as lotus flowers in the early summer. The dance was so natural that their limbs seemed to be molded from soft wax, bending to the invisible hand. Those who had never witnessed this scene would have thought they had lost themselves in a fairyland. But for the prince, these beautiful scenes were all too familiar. That night, a talented and beautiful young woman was invited to join the fun. As the dancers left, a young lady in pure white clothes walked in, her face innocent and naive. In her hand, she held a 9-stringed zither. She bowed and knelt down in the middle of the green carpet, looking like a beautiful flower blooming in the middle of the green grass. No one knew what song she played. The whole of Kapilavastu had never heard it before. The music had a magical power. The listener, no matter how sad he was, would feel relieved, and the most angry person would become peaceful. The melody made people feel that life on earth was truly lovely. Every time she stopped playing, the clear sound of a bird would suddenly follow. It turned out that she had skillfully trained a smart bird to perch on the instrument. Everyone thought the sound of the bird was part of the instrument, but they did not expect it to be the chirping of that little bird. After she finished playing, she began to sing. Oh, her voice was as clear as crystal, sometimes high, sometimes low, seemingly responding to the secret desires of each person. Before her innocent beauty and clear voice, even the jealousy of the concubines disappeared. When she finished singing, the prince felt relieved, and the people at the party seemed to be immersed in ecstasy. They had been holding their breaths listening until now, and now they dared to breathe a sigh of relief. The prince turned around and smiled, and a guard quickly reported, "Your Highness, she is Udāyin of the Brahmin caste." As if the sun was on his horse, the prince was so happy that his old sadness almost disappeared. The guards were also happy, so some of them dared to joke around, like when the prince had nothing to worry about. The prince treated his servants as if they were brothers. A guard said to the prince, "Does the prince remember the house with lots of flowers south of the imperial city? What's strange about that house, you tell me?" "Your Highness, there is music there that no one in this country has heard, except perhaps me." The prince smiled as he remembered the night he listened to the music in the palace. "Is it better than the music of Udāyin? Then take me there. The crown prince is Udāyin. Why do you say no one has heard?" "Your Highness, it was very late at night, a night when the entire capital of Kapilavastu was fast asleep. That day I had a day off and rode home to visit. As I was passing by, I happened to hear the clear sound of a zither coming from that house. I stopped my horse and absent-mindedly forgot about going home. Your Highness, I heard a song more strange than the one in the palace the day before. Then we go this way. As Prince Sakyamuni spoke, he turned his horse to the left, and the guards all smiled happily and followed him. The horse's hooves thundered on the gravel road, the wind blowing the horse's golden mane past the prince's white velvet robe with red buttons. A large white scarf covered his forehead, revealing his jade robe, a raised bump between his eyebrows, and a mass of jet black hair, each strand curling to the right. Under the deep blue sky in the distance before the crown prince, a city appeared in the clear light. For a moment, the crown prince thought that those houses belonged to the subjects under the king's rule. And among those houses, there was the house of a talented girl. The crown prince imagined the musician from the day before. Just then, groans from the side of the road reached the prince's ears. The prince turned back and asked the guard, "It sounds like someone is groaning. Listen closely. Is that right?" The guards listened and answered in unison, "Yes, Your Highness." The groaning was clearly heard from a bush by the roadside. In the bush, there was a very thin black man whose head had lost its hair, whose scalp was exposed like a coconut shell. His whole body was covered with horrible sores, and his entire body gave off a foul odor that made onlookers not dare to approach him. He was a leper belonging to the Bali sect, a lower caste in India, who was kicked down like an animal by passers-by, because no one wanted to be near a sick person of a caste that was considered lowly. Hearing the sound of someone approaching, he raised his two severed hands like two claws to the sky, and his eyes, which had almost lost all their pupils, tried to open to look up. It was as if he no longer believed that his fellow men would pity him. Seeing this scene, the prince blurted out, "Is there any other way to cure it?" A follower replied, "As for that terrible disease of leprosy, there is no cure." Prince Sakyamuni took off his own shirt, a white velvet shirt with red buttons and gold thread embroidered on the chest, and covered the other man with it, then returned with his guards. On the way back, Prince Sakyamuni's eyes became sad. His face always showed a pensive look. The king tried every way to make the prince happy, but to no avail. One day, by chance, the king suddenly remembered the girl who played the zither. The king thought, perhaps the prince was upset because the palace looked miserable. The concubines did not know how to dress up, did not have the talent to talk to cheer him up. Luckily, there was this girl. The other day when I heard her singing, I was also fascinated. I felt like I forgot all the worries in life. Yes, that's right. She is of Brahmin descent. What talent is there but profound learning, strict morality? I will ask her to see. Thinking so, she sent someone to invite Udāyin to the palace. She humbly said, Your Majesty's grace is known to all the people in the country. Everyone is talking about it. I am like a speck of dust under the sun, like a bubble in the ocean. For so long I have only known how to enjoy your sublime graces. Now that you have entrusted me with the task of serving the crown prince, I am very happy, but also afraid. Lady Udāyin, who here does not know your virtue and beauty, please take this opportunity to show your loyalty. That day the king came to advise the prince. How many times have I had to repeat that I have only you left in this world whom I cherish? How many times have you made me sad, thinking of your mother? Oh, if you knew the longings of your mother when she was old and still had not conceived. If you knew the times when your mother and I were happy with her strange dreams. Oh, if you knew the joys of your mother when she carried you in her womb, praying that you would be better than others. Every time you are unhappy, I sadly think of your mother and regret that she is no longer here to comfort you for me. Dear Father, I have been a disobedient son. From now on, I ask to be happy so that you will be satisfied and my mother's soul will rest in peace in the ninth heaven. How can my mother see me now? And neither can I. Where can I find her image in this mortal world? As if knowing that Prince Sakyamuni was about to fall into his trap, the king remained calm and did not reveal his happiness. Your words reminded me of something I had completely forgotten. What do you remember, Father? There is a person living in this city who looks very much like mother and son in the past. Father, who is that man? I want to find him. Yes, your idea is very good, because poor you were just born 7 days ago when your mother hurriedly left Lumbini Garden. The person you want is none other than Udāyi, the one who played the zither the day before. That evening in the garden, Udāyin sat on a leather chair in front of the king and the prince. The Indian moon cast a magical light over the citadel. The tall rosewood trees seemed to follow the music drawn by the strings under the 10 fingers of the talented artist. The jasmine bushes were laden with fragrant flowers that made the servants standing nearby, no matter how simple they were, become as dreamy as the poet. The next day, the king gave Udāyi's parents gold, jewels, and precious stones to bring her to the palace. Although they were greatly rewarded, the old couple could not help but feel sad because they were away from their daughter. Gold, jade, and pearls are not as precious as the love between a mother and her child. It pains me to be away from you. You are still young. Who will take care of you? However, no one dares to disobey the king's orders. I pray that the king and the crown prince will love you as your parents do. Udāyin comforted his mother. I am grown up now, mother. Why should I make you worry about me? The prince is very gentle, as you have seen when he walks in front of our house. I will try to make him happy. He will surely pamper me like you do. The old man was less reluctant and advised his son, You are 15 years old now. Try to maintain your character. You must always be humble and well-behaved, like the days when you lived with your parents, because position and wealth can easily corrupt a person's character. Just be happy. Your parents will be happy for you. Udāyin bowed her head in obedience to her parents. Then she ran to find her younger brother, a boy who was busy gluing a small kite. Have a nice stay. Don't bother your parents. I'll bring you some gifts and cakes. You'll feed the animals for me. Always take care of them and don't beat them. Saying that, she pulled me out to the garden to visit the familiar scenery. The star fruit tree under which she had often sat and played the guitar for the whole family to listen. Who else will sing under the moonlight when you're gone? Charcoal lily, who caresses me? Who do I bloom for? Rose coquettish, whose hair do I hold? Udāyin replied, My friends, my parents, and my brother take better care of me than I do. The flock of geese then came up from the water. Who will give us your hand to operate on? My sister will give you her hand, which is more beautiful than mine. The water in the lake also obeys. Who is looking at my reflection in the afternoon? There is also my sister reflected in your heart. My sister is more obedient than me, more beautiful than me. Doves and other garden birds also came. Are you really going away? Who will we sing to without you, and who will sing with us? My parents and my younger brother will hear your sweet melodies. My younger brother's voice is better than mine, and will join you. The dog at that time also ran around her legs. She goes, Who caresses me and takes me for a walk? My brother drew for fun with you. At that time, her little bird flew everywhere. I will follow her. You will follow me and perch on my piano. When her parents and younger brother took her to the door, she seemed to remember something and turned back to tell her younger brother, Do you remember the monks who come to beg for food in front of the door every day? You will respectfully give them food to me. At the door, the carriage was ready to take her into the palace. The attendants bowed to welcome her. Back at the palace, Udāyi tried every way to make the prince happy. Seeing the innocent appearance of that girl, the prince could not be sad anymore. Every day, the prince and she rode horses in the spacious garden. Beside the beautiful flowers, the green leaves were bustling with birds singing. The prince's wife, Dududala, loved her very much because she taught her children beautiful songs and music. Udāyi used gentle words to advise her like an older sister and a younger sister. With the servants, she always showed humility and tolerance. She loved everyone around her, and even personally picked medicinal leaves to cure them when they were in danger. But in life, being loved by many people often makes petty people more jealous. Fortunately, in the palace, there was only one person who secretly hated Udāyi. That was the concubine named Sai-A. One day, Udāyi entered her room and saw that the clothes hanging on the hangers were all bitten, even though the room was high and clean, without any rats or mice. Another time, her zither suddenly broke a few strings, causing her to work hard all day to fix them. Once, she took care of a precious flower pot that was to be displayed in the crown prince's study. In the morning, the flowers were still in beautiful buds, but in the afternoon she cried because the flowers had disappeared. Udāyin guessed that someone was plotting to harm her, but she did not know who, because everyone in the palace treated her kindly. While she was unaware, Saya thought of even more evil plans to harm her. But he did not expect that doing evil would not necessarily harm anyone, but that he himself would be in trouble. One night, knowing that Udāyin would be fast asleep because he had to play music late at night, Saya sent a loyal servant to sneak into her room on his orders. Udāyin slept soundly on the pure white mattress, his small hands still not leaving the 9-stringed lute. A lovely bird perched at the head of the bed. Who could bear to stand before him and think of killing him? At that moment, Saya's servant had just arrived at the guard in front of Udāyin's room. He intended to put in sleeping pills as Saya ordered, but thought to himself, "This guy is sleeping like the dead. It's a waste to put him in sleeping pills. I'll give that girl more medicine later. The longer she's unconscious, the easier it will be for me to act." It smiled, losing all its previous worries, and walked over to the soldier who was sleeping on the floor. It opened the door and sneaked into Udāyin's room. The bird heard the movement and chirped and pecked at the sleeping girl's hand. But because she was tired, Udāyin was absorbed as if she didn't know anything. Saya's servant immediately took out some medicine and sprinkled it on her eyes and waved her hand to chase the bird away. The bird flew away in fear in a corner of the room, but it still chirped. The maid took a small box out of her pocket, but her hand stopped abruptly. Before the gentle face that was sleeping soundly, it felt like it was standing before something pure and precious. It wanted to hug it, to take away all its sins. It turned away, not wanting to harm the sleeping person anymore. Udāyin's chest rose and fell gently as if she was sleeping very peacefully. But the maid turned back and suddenly remembered the reward Saya had promised it. Money always has the power to incite people to do wrong, partly because of the desire for the reward, partly because of the fear that if she did not succeed, she would be tortured by her master. The maidservant turned around and resolutely pulled out the box. If she had been a little quicker, the gentle girl would not have been in this world anymore. But her hands were shaking so much that a snake in the box that should have fallen on Udāyin clung to the box and crawled straight into her hand. She was so frightened that she screamed. At that moment, the servant just woke up, and Udāyin's servant in the next room heard the scream and ran in. Saya's maidservant could not escape. In the horror, she confessed her crime. Soon she was taken to prison for questioning, and the doctors came to remove the anesthetic from Udāyin. Saya's plot was revealed. The king was so angry that he decided to kill the evildoer along with the maidservant who had assisted him. Hearing this news, Udāyin was moved with compassion and asked for the other people's sentences to be lightened. Moved by her kindness, although she was imprisoned, she avoided death. She repented of her crimes and vowed from then on to reform her character. The people in the palace loved the virtuous girl even more. After that disaster, Udāyin lived happily with the prince. They often played chess together, read books together, and played music together. They were truly a happy young couple in this life. However, something happened that no one would have expected. That day, the king's horse convoy leisurely pulled out of the eastern gate. The sun was shining brightly on the flat road. The horse convoy ran under the shade of 2 rows of trees with leaves spreading out like large fans. Through those trees, the prince saw the naked plowmen and the buffaloes working hard on the muddy fields. A cool breeze blew by, and the prince suddenly thought of the pleasure of riding on horses under the cool shade of the trees and the hard work of those farmers under the harsh sunlight. The prince had seen that scene when he was a child during a walk with his father. It turned out that people's compassion did not change with time. That scene had just passed, and after a while, the horse group encountered something huge, blocking the path. A guard reported, "Your Highness, please let me go first to see what is lying across the road." Having said that, he rode his horse forward. When the crown prince and his servants got closer, they saw that the guard had dismounted and thrown the object to the side of the road. The object was as stiff as a log. The prince said, "The body is a dead man." He jumped on his horse and intended to follow the prince to continue his outing. But the prince reined in his horse and looked at the corpse that the flies were freely eating. The prince felt his heart ache and sat thinking about how miserable human life is. All his life is filled with worries, sickness, old age, and death. Thinking of this, the prince no longer wanted to go out for an outing. The guards saw the prince return and were sad and worried. They discussed taking the prince back to the garden and inviting Udāyin to comfort the prince. Udāyin hurried out to the garden. She was as passionate as a fairy in a fairyland. However, the prince still calmly sat in contemplation under a tree. Udāyin approached and whispered, "Your Highness, are you sad today because, as the guard said, you have seen sad things? If so, why don't you take advantage of this dark night to take a walk to distract yourself instead of keeping your sadness to yourself? Or is it my fault for not being able to attend to you in time?" The prince remained calm and did not reply. "Your Highness, don't you remember one day in the flower garden, you told me I was your sister. My face looks like the queen. Isn't that enough to make you happy?" The prince saw the bright, sparkling eyes of the girl kneeling before him and ordered her to stand up. "I don't want her to know my sadness because she is like that innocent flower. Your Highness, those flowers are sad too. Today I see all the flowers are drooping. Is that not true? Which flower can keep its color for a long time? Dear Prince, life is the same. Who does not get sick, ill, and die? But the death of plants and trees is not blood and flesh, and when people and animals are sick, sometimes no one can stand near them. Therefore, I know that people are born to suffer, so I want to find a way to eliminate that suffering. I have run out of ways to entertain myself. There is something I want, but I cannot have. But the way to be happy, how can I be happy when I think about it? I cannot find it beside my life of luxury and comfort. There are so many people suffering, rolling around, sick, old and sick." Udāyin did not know how to explain, so he knelt down and told the prince with a sad face. At that moment, realizing that because of him, the people around him were suffering, the prince forced a smile and stood up to walk around the garden with Udāyin. The servants who had been worried until now, afraid that if the prince was still sad, he would be scolded by his father, at that moment also cheered up. Birds from all four sides of the garden also flew over, joining in a very happy song. The lilies suddenly stretched themselves up, turning the garden white, making the other flowers and butterflies even more brilliant. Although he tried to force himself to be happy, the prince's pensive expression was often unhidden. The king tried every way to distract the prince. The music and singing were continuous. However, it seemed to have little effect. One day, the king told Udāyin, "From now on, every evening you will accompany the prince to the North Gate flower garden that I have just built. Every day, you will change into a beautiful dress to join the nature there to make the prince happy, because I am sure that no one can compare to you in this matter. The flower and water pavilions in the garden are not just for the prince. They are a reward I give you to share in the joy with the prince." That afternoon, Prince Sakyamuni and Udāyin rode on horseback ahead of a group of guards in brightly colored robes. Udāyin pointed to the beautiful colors on a bush, on the water, or in a patch of sky that appeared one after another on both sides of the road. Prince Sakyamuni always smiled, but in his eyes there was still a lingering sadness. The North Gate Garden of King Siddhartha is the most beautiful garden in India. In the garden there are rare and precious trees and flowers brought from various places. Birds and animals perch from faraway places. The paths are as clean as carpeted tables. The grass is green and fresh. The clear lakes reflect the reflections. The pavilions are encrusted with gold and jade and shine with brilliant light. Entering the garden, one cannot count the colors of the flowers and animals in it with the eyes. Coming to the lake, the skin is cool and the fragrance is strong. One would think that all the Indian perfumes were taken from there. In short, it is as if this garden has distilled all the essence of the fairy universe. However, the prince glanced at the scenery and then found a corner of a tree to sit and think, and told his servants to take Udāyin for a walk around. Everyone was hesitating, but the prince firmly said, "You should obey me to make me happy. Udāyin, you should go for a walk. because this place is cool, so I will sit here for a while. I will follow you later." The prince sat alone under a tree, thinking. Many old scenes came back to his mind. Moments of joy, moments of sadness, scenes of luxury, sick and hungry people, and the tragedies of human life appeared one after another in the prince's mind. At that moment, a hairless man wearing an ugly robe and leaning on a stick came over. But his demeanor was majestic. His eyes sparkled as if they had an electric current. The prince saw in this man's strange demeanor a mysterious air, completely different from the people he had met in the palace. The prince asked, "Where are you? I am in the forest in this country. What are you doing here?" "Sir, I am a monk who seeks to learn the way." "What kind of person is a monk?" "As a person who specializes in thinking about the reasons behind everything, to find ways to break all the troubles that bind people to this life of loss and gain, so that in the future, after this life, they will not have to endure another life." Having said that, the teacher used his magic to suddenly fly into the sky, blending in with the magical colors of the sunset. The prince shouted with joy, "Great, great! I will practice to achieve that, then I will listen." Udāyin and his servants returned. Although it was under the setting sun, everyone was surprised that Prince Sakyamuni had become happy. That night the prince asked his father to let him practice like the monk. The king was startled and tried to dissuade him. "Who planted this crazy idea in you? Aren't you the king of this land? Now you have become a miserable, ragged monk. How humiliating. Isn't this the end of the royal line? Dear father, the merit of your parents is as great as the sky and the sea. I live among jewels and gems, among pampering and indulgence, lacking nothing. However, for a long time I have been troubled and have not had any joy. No gold or gem can dispel it. Now, by chance, I have met a monk and heard a few words from him, and my heart feels as if the burden that has been burdening me for so long has been lifted. So please, Father, let me become a monk. That is a way to complete happiness. I have done my best to please the crown prince, but on this matter I cannot listen. You are the king's son. You will be the king. That is all I know. Do not beg for anything more." From then on, the king ordered his servants to guard the palace very strictly. Wherever the prince went, people followed him. But thinking about becoming a monk, the prince was always happy. Every night, there were strict guards at the city gates and soldiers on patrol. Prince Shakyamuni still thought day and night about his plan to become a monk. One night, the crown prince waited until there was no more noise in the palace, then gently got up, put on his coat, and took a short sword with him. Through the open windows, the night sky was only twinkling with faint stars. The crown prince stretched himself from the third-floor window and jumped down into the flower garden. Occasionally, the guards would pass by carrying bows. As soon as Prince Shakyamuni landed on the ground, he jumped into a group of jasmine trees to avoid the guards. At that moment, a dark figure nearby also jumped out. Prince Shakyamuni quickly locked the man's arms. "Your Highness, it's me." Hearing the voice, Prince Sakyamuni recognized the voice of his loyal servant, Sanak. "You startled me, and I thought you were a guard. Is that done?" The others drank the drugged wine and fell asleep. I intended to come in here and invite the prince to leave immediately. I aimed at the window through which he had just jumped, but the guards had not yet left. "Come on, let's hurry. Where's the horse?" "Under the water coconut tree over there." The two men threaded their way through the trees and mounted their horses. In the night, the feet of the prince's horse shone like 4 green lights. However, none of the guards noticed. Each was fast asleep. In no time, the 2 horses were pounding their hooves on the deserted road outside Kapilavastu. The silent streets of the palace, sleeping peacefully in the dead of night, under the dim moon and stars, were gradually left behind in the darkness, and then disappeared. The prince had just reached a dense forest. "Dear Sanak, please go back and give the horse to Udāyin because I don't want anyone to follow me into the forest." Sanak was about to plead, but the crown prince signaled him to obey and return immediately. Sanak sadly led the horse back. When he returned, the prince's figure had just disappeared into the dense forest. At dawn, Udāyin heard a small but urgent call outside the door. As soon as Udāyin opened the door, Sanak hurriedly said, "My lady, the prince gave you a precious horse. I have tied it outside. Goodbye, lady. I'm going to confess my crime." Udāyin was shocked and grabbed Zanak's shirt to ask about the whole story. Zanak told him the story. Udāyin cried bitterly. Zanak comforted him. "Miss, this is the Crown Prince's wish. Don't you want the Crown Prince to be happy?" However, she still could not suppress her feelings, left Zanak sitting there, went out to get Zanak's horse and galloped out of the imperial city in front of the bewildered soldiers. Zanak sat alone, shaking his head sadly. Outside in the yard, birds were shaking their feathers, filling the path. 3 days wandering in the jungle, hungry and tired, she still could not find the prince. Udāyin collapsed beside her horse. On the third night, when she opened her eyes, she felt unusually light. A naked man without beard or hair, but with the wrinkles on his face and body, he looked very old. Udāyin felt weak all over. She glanced at her horse standing by a tree and was about to run back to get the horse to escape. The other person called out to her, "Udāyin." Hearing her name called, she turned around in surprise but tried to be brave enough to see who knew her. "Don't you remember me?" "I don't understand, sir." "Don't you remember you gave me food at your house? You forget so quickly?" She thought the devil was haunting her because she couldn't remember who he was. However, she still politely answered, "Yes, I know you are busy looking for the Crown Prince, right?" Hearing someone guess her thoughts correctly, she quickly shouted, "Sir, where is the prince? Please tell me. Which way did the prince go?" "The prince has gone far away, miss. Just sit here and I will help you." Udāyin obeyed. "I will not hide anything from you. I am a long-time monk in this forest who has learned some magical powers and has predicted past and future events. Last night, looking at a star, I knew that the prince would become a monk. I was very happy because the prince would surely become a great savior in the future. Sir, will I meet the prince?" "Don't worry, the prince has gone deep into the forest and it will be difficult to meet him. But be happy because he will definitely become a Buddha to save all living beings." "What is Buddha like? Is he more powerful and happier than the prince?" "We ourselves also try to practice so that one day we can see the light of Buddha. Buddha is the one with great compassion and understanding of all the profound reasons and mysterious causes to guide us away from the path of sin and suffering. No prince can compare. So will the prince become a Buddha? Will he come back to us? He will definitely become a Buddha that has never existed in this world before. Well, I will only say that much to make you happy. You should listen to me and go home immediately because according to my guess, it is time for you to go home. Ride your horse and run home. I will take you out of this forest. Here are some pills. Take one of them now." As soon as she finished taking one, she immediately felt happy and found words to comfort herself. The prince will become Buddha and will return to us. When she reached the gate, she heard crying and ran in to see her mother and younger sister sitting by her father's bed. The old man was gasping for breath on the hospital bed. She took a pill and put it in her father's mouth. Immediately, the old man opened his eyes, propped himself up on his hands and sat up, conscious as usual. She then took 2 more pills and gave them to her mother and younger sister. Immediately, everyone became happy. The mother hugged her child. "I was so lucky to see my child again, happier than before." "But how did he get here?" Udāyin told his parents everything. Both of them looked happy. At that moment, the plants in the garden also rustled. The starfruit tree said, "She is back. She will sing happily with us, at my roots. Lily, tonight I will bloom white for you to caress. Persimmon, I will hold your hair, my girl. The goose, she will give me her beautiful hands to plow rice. Lake surface, every afternoon, she comes here to wash her feet, and I get to hold her shadow again. Pigeons and warblers, she sings with us again. Dog, caress me, caress me. The bird has been following her since the day she left the palace. I will always perch on her harp." Udāyin thought that the days she lived in the palace next to the prince were just a beautiful dream to decorate her life. From now on, she could truly live happily next to the scenery that always caressed her. In the years that followed, Udāyin lived a simple but meaningful life. She continued to sing and play the lute, not to seek fame or status, but to bring joy to those around her. She dutifully cared for her elderly parents and taught her younger sister lessons about life and love. Every morning, Udāyin wakes up with gratitude. She watches the sunrise, listens to the birds, and feels her breath. She understands that each moment is precious and unrepeatable. This helps her live fully in the present, without regretting the past or worrying about the future. In her village, Udāyin became a respected figure, not only for her past, but also for her wisdom and kindness. She often shared lessons from her life with young people, advising them to seek true happiness from within rather than from external fame or wealth. As the years passed, news spread of a new Buddha. It was said that he was Prince Siddhartha, who had discovered the way to liberate all beings from suffering. Udāyin listened to these stories with joy and gratitude. She understood that the prince's decision, although it had brought her pain, had ultimately benefited countless people. One day, a group of monks passed through the village, bringing the teachings of the Buddha. Udāyin listened to them and realized that what she had learned through her own experiences was completely consistent with the Buddha's teachings. She felt a deep connection to these teachings and decided to dedicate the rest of her life to studying and practicing Buddhism. Udāyin began holding small gatherings in her garden, where she shared her Buddhist teachings and guided people in meditation. She was no longer the dreamy young girl she had been, but a mature woman, full of wisdom and compassion. As she grew older, Udāyin looked back on her life with gratitude and peace. She understood that all the hardships and challenges were valuable lessons that helped her grow and find her true path. She no longer felt regret for what she had lost, but instead cherished what she had gained. In her final days, Udāyin often sat under the star fruit tree in the garden, where she had sung and played the zither when she was young. She smiled as she recalled her journey from an ambitious young girl to a calm and mindful woman. She understood that true happiness lies not in the destination, but in the path itself. Udāyin's story is a vivid example of the transformation of consciousness, from attachment to detachment, from ignorance to enlightenment. It reminds us that in every situation of life, whether happy or painful, there are valuable lessons of Buddhism. It is through living fully and mindfully in each moment that we can find the path to true liberation. From the story of Udāyin, we can draw 3 important Buddhist lessons. Bookmark, heading HF1, 1. Impermanence and acceptance. Udāyin's life went through many changes, from being an ordinary young woman to being loved by the prince, then returning to a simple life with her family. This illustrates the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. Everything changes, nothing lasts forever. Udāyin learned to accept these changes instead of clinging to the past. She realized that true happiness does not depend on external circumstances, but comes from inner peace. Bookmark, heading H.32. Compassion and sacrifice. Prince Siddhartha's act of giving up a life of luxury to seek the path to liberation for all sentient beings demonstrated boundless compassion. Although Udāyin did not understand this decision at first, she gradually came to realize its noble meaning. This teaches us that sometimes, in order to benefit the many, we must sacrifice our own desires and interests. True compassion requires the courage to overcome personal attachments. Bookmark, heading 8H.2. 3. Enlightenment and true happiness. Ultimately, Udāyin found joy and peace in a simple life, in harmony with nature and loved ones. This reflects the Buddhist teaching of finding true happiness not in external things, but in the soul. Enlightenment does not necessarily come from completely renouncing worldly life, but can be achieved through living a meaningful, grateful, and mindful life. By the end of the story, we see Udāyin embark on a profound spiritual journey. Although she did not follow the path of renunciation like the prince, she found her own enlightenment in everyday life. She learned to appreciate the little things, from the chirping of birds to the scent of lilies, from the love of her family to her connection with the nature around her. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to a video from the Buddhist Folktales collection, which is broadcast at 7 p.m. every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on the YouTube channel Buddhastory Master You. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the upcoming episodes, please remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your family and friends. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Please leave a comment below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Namo Sakyamuni Buddha.